How's it going, everybody? Saxophonist Ryan Devlin here. Happy to be back on the Jazz Lesson Videos channel. Today we're going to be talking about how to play out in jazz. We're going to go through 5 different levels of playing outside of the chord changes. Playing out is just a nickname for playing outside of the chord progressions that are given on the page, and weaving back into the harmony to create some satisfying emotional contrast in our solos. I remember when I was first listening to music, my favorite genre was funk when I was growing up, and I really loved Maceo Parker. He's really my first favorite saxophone player. And when I would listen to Maceo Parker, a lot of the harmony that he's playing is inside of the chord changes. A lot of minor pentatonics, a lot of blues scale, a lot of funky stuff. Every once in a while, he would play a note that maybe wasn't inside of the chord changes, and my ear would kind of gravitate towards that. And eventually, listening to other players in this kind of genre, I gravitated towards the Brecker brothers. I remember my dad showing me that record Heavy Metal Bebop, and hearing some of Michael Brecker's solos, particularly the one on Funky C, Funky Do. I really enjoyed the contrast that Brecker was doing in and out of the harmony on his solo. And I had no idea what it was, but it really caught my ear. And that led me into getting into more players that do this, like Jerry Bergonzi, Steve Grossman, John Coltrane, just to name a few. So on that note, let's go ahead and discuss some of our ways of playing out. Everything that we're going to be going over today can be found in the Chad Lefkowitz Brown resource, 68 phrases on one-chorded vamps. And if you use my code RD5, you get $5 off your purchase. All right, so let's first talk about how we can play outside with implied harmonies. All this means is that we're going to take a chord progression or a set of harmony and play it on top of the harmony that is written. So we're going to look at the first page of our resource here and play some of these implied harmonies over C major 7. So in this example, we are playing a minor 2/5 to the relative minor of C major. The relative minor of C major is A minor. These hold a lot of common tones, but it gives an interesting sound because we're playing a 2/5 that is not on the C major vamp. So rather than constructing a line with our scale and chord from C major, we're now implying the chords and scales from a minor 2/5 to its relative major. In this case, B half diminished to E7 altered to A minor. Let's hear how this sounds. So let's analyze this now. So the first measure of this, we stay diatonic to C major, C, D, E, G, B, A, G. Those are all inside of our C major scale. Then on the and of 4 of our first measures where we start to pivot into the minor 2/5 tonality now of A minor. So with that G flat, that transitioned us to a downwards arpeggio of B half diminished. F natural, D natural, B natural, A, hitting the third of our implied harmony of E7 altered or E7 flat 9. Up to F, to D sharp, leading up to the 5th of our implied A minor tonality, or the 3rd of C major, so kind of like we're coming back home now. And then an enclosure phrase that goes to the root, or the 3rd of A minor, C natural there, and then another enclosure phrase that it resolves to G and E. So we're implying that tonality of the minor 2/5, and really, the only notes that are outside of our C major chord are G sharp, D sharp, A sharp, and A flat, and F sharp. But really, these are all chromatic approach notes. So the majority of this is inside of that C major tonality because we're going to our relative minor. And relative majors and minors are obviously related. So this is a really cool way of toying at a different implied progression. Another level of this would be to play a tritone substitution of your progression. So playing F sharp over C. Another way is playing the Coltrane matrix. If you listen to John Coltrane play in the 1960s and beyond, a lot of the times when he's playing on vamps, he'll imply his giant steps progression over different keys. It gives a really interesting sound because he always resolves at different lengths, but it sounds like he's not playing the tonality that's given. He's kind of searching above it. So it's a really cool thing to practice on your own via this resource.
All right, let's move on to our second technique that's going to help us play out in a jazz context. This one is through outside substitutions. This is very similar to implied harmonies, but the key difference is the alternative harmonies that we're going to construct will instead have a very distant relationship from our home key. The goal here is to maximize dissonant intervals so that we can increase the feeling of tension before we release to our home key. So let's play a phrase that uses these outside substitutions from our resource. You can find those on page 3.
So as you can hear, that D flat section, the second measure of this line, has no relation to that C major chord. So we're playing kind of a standard bebop phrase, ba ba da ba da ba 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 ba. But because we're implying it over that C major 7 chord, it sounds so different. It's really interesting how you can take inside lines from other keys and then imply them over different harmony, and they sound completely different. I think getting the most out of one line and trying to make that work over multiple keys is just as important and valuable as trying to put things through all 12 keys and playing them where they're supposed to go. This is really improvising with vocabulary. So this line in particular, we're just playing a standard D flat major 7 phrase over C major 7 and then resolving. And notice how we resolve with approach tones and enclosures. So the real part of this phrase that's important to remember is A flat, G flat, G. Beat 4 of the second measure into the beat 1 of the third measure. That's where we really resolve. That D flat in the third measure is just a passing tone. I don't count that as D flat major 7. The start of the third measure is where the resolution of C major comes back. The great George Garzone once said he wants to master the harmony so well that he can play up a half step on a ballad and make it sound beautiful. I think this is a great thing to think about when learning how to play outside and practicing it. It's really the intention that makes this beautiful. This line, ba ba da ba in D flat, is a strong enough line with the resolution of an enclosure at the end of it where the harmony doesn't really matter. The melody matters more. So when practicing these lines, remember, melody is always king. The chords are just suggestions. Also, resolving in 2, 4, 6 bar, 8 bar phrases really works well. So practice playing lines like this where you play 1 bar inside, 1 bar outside, 1 bar inside. 2 bars inside, 2 bars outside, 2 bars inside, and going back and forth like that in different amounts of numbers. All right, so for our third example, we're now going to be talking about melodic cell playing. Now, melodic cell playing can be inside and outside of the chord. In this case, we're going to be implying these melodic cells outside of the chord, meaning targeting notes that are not in our chord scale or our chord. And again, this technique is mastered by the amount you do it and where you resolve. Melodic cells can be any 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 note phrase that has a target tone. So for example, this is a melodic cell. Melodic cells can be any lengths of notes as long as you know where you're starting and where you're ending. The middle part can be anything you want. So let's dive into the exercise of melodic cells from our resource. We're going to go to page number 4. So we're continuing with this C major sound. Let's take a listen to this melodic cell example. So we have a couple melodic cell shapes being played here over C major. And we're targeting non-chord tones and chord tones to go inside and outside of our chord change of C major 7. So this first melodic cell shape is inside of the key, C, G, A, C, all diatonic. Then we go B natural, F sharp, G sharp, C sharp, outside of the chord, kind of implying C sharp major 7 there. Then we go D, C sharp, C natural, D. That's kind of like an in-between one because you have D naturals and C naturals, but that C sharp will definitely pull the ear. Then we go inside again, B, G, A, B. Then we go outside, C sharp, C natural, B, C sharp. Outside again, A sharp, F sharp, G sharp, A sharp. Then inside, G, F sharp, F, G, and resolve E, C. So we're kind of flip-flopping between when we go inside and outside of the tonality just with 4 notes. And this is a great thing to practice yourself. Try and play your own lines where you play 4 notes inside, 4 notes outside. Check this out. So you can practice these melodic cells at different lengths, different shapes, but really think about implying them inside and outside of the chord, going back and forth at different lengths, just like we talked about with those implied progressions. You can do the same thing with implied melodic cells. It's also a key to practice these things separately. You want to really master what a melodic cell is first before trying to play it outside of the chord. We have some great resources for that as well, and great videos on this channel to check out with melodic cells. All right, so for our fourth technique, we're going to be checking out pentatonic shifting. Now, we have a whole separate video on pentatonic shifting, so I encourage you to check that out. But in this context, we're going to talk about pentatonic shifting and how to play outside with it. The definition of pentatonic shifting is taking 2 or more pentatonic scales and shifting between the 2 of them, going back and forth. Kind of like how we talked about with melodic cells, playing them inside and playing them outside. We're just now going to do it with pentatonics. So a pentatonic scale is 5 notes. The ones that we're going to be talking about today are minor pentatonics. They're spelled 1, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 7, 1. So let's hear this line. So in this example here, over C major 7, we're going to keep that the same. We're going to shift between D minor pentatonic, E flat minor pentatonic, A minor pentatonic, and E minor pentatonic. All these pentatonics are somewhat related to C major 7, some more than others, and that's where we get our outside tonality, tension and release. So D minor pentatonic has some common tones of C. In the scale, they share D, they share F, they share G, they share A, and they share C. So all 5 notes of the D minor pentatonic scale are inside of the scale of C major, where the chord comes from. When we shift to E flat minor pentatonic, none of the notes in E flat minor pentatonic are in the tonality of C major. B flat, E flat, G flat, and A flat are not anywhere near C major. Most of them are half steps away, which is where all that tension is built. A minor pentatonic and E minor pentatonic do have common tones. A minor pentatonic has A, C, D, E, and G. All those notes are in the C major scale. And E minor has E, G, A, B, and D. All of those notes are shared with the C major scale. So really, between D minor, A minor, and E minor, we're covering that C major tonality, and then the outside tonality comes from the E flat minor. So practice these minor pentatonic shifting ideas just like you would practice the melodic cell ideas. Use them at different lengths. Do 1 bar of inside pentatonics and 1 bar of outside pentatonics. Do 2 bars and 2 bars. Practice them in different variants. And remember, every major scale has multiple minor pentatonics that you can play inside of the tonality, specifically off the 2 or the 9, the 3, and the 6. So like we have here in C major, you can play D minor pentatonic, E minor pentatonic, and A minor pentatonic. Those are all inside of the tonality of C major. All the other ones have outside notes of C major. So you don't have to play E flat minor to get that outside tonality. You could play different ones. You could play F minor. You could play B flat minor. There's a lot of different possibilities. So know what your inside pentatonics are, and then pick and choose which outside ones you want, and then practice them at different lengths.
The final concept I'm going to share with you today is called triadic shifting. This is where we use triads to create tension and release, modulating to different key centers. This is another great way to play out, and sounds particularly intense because of how rapidly the modulations happen. So let's take a look at a phrase out of our resource. This is on page 9 that demonstrates this triadic shifting concept. So as you can hear, we are modulating to different keys, different triads on this line over C major 7. The key centers we are shifting to are C, the home key, D, E, F sharp, A flat, A, B, and C. Now, there's a little system to this. D, E, F sharp, and A flat are all whole steps apart, and then we go to A and B, which is another whole step apart, and then back to C. You can use these triads in randomized orders or sequences. There's a couple of great musicians, legendary musicians to check out that do this. One of my favorites is John Coltrane. He plays a lot of triads and little melodic cells over tunes like Giant Steps, and applies those same progressions over 1-chorded vamps. Definitely gets a really cool out sound. Another person is George Garzone, who has this whole concept called triadic chromatic approach, which he really got from listening to John Coltrane. So check out those players if you want to dive into this concept even deeper. But this particular example, we had that whole step relationship happening between the first 5 triads, going up in whole steps. So it's almost like we're playing kind of a whole tone tonality over that C major chord. Then when we go A to B into C, the A and the B triads are a little bit more related to C, so they almost feel like we're getting back to a resolution once we get to those 2. There's more half-step resolution between A, B, and C than other chords. So it leads us back to that home key center of C major. So when you're trying to practice this yourself, after reading the lines in the resource, I would try pairing your own triads and shifting between the tonalities, just like we do with pentatonics and melodic cells through this exercise, but now in this exercise. So do the whole step, do major thirds, do fourths. It's really fun to mix and match different triads together to get that out sound. The most important part of all these concepts is how we get back home, how we resolve back to our home key. In this case, that's C. So try and experiment around with playing different sequences that eventually lead back to C and different lengths of sequences. 2 bars, 4 bars, 5 bars, 6 bars, and always getting back to your home key.
All right, that concludes today's video. I hope you enjoyed learning about these different concepts of playing outside of the changes. Remember, all the techniques that we talked about are in Chad Lefkowitz-Brown's resource, 68 Phrases on 1-Chorded Vamps. I learned a lot of these concepts at a deeper level with Chad when I was studying with him during my undergrad years. And don't forget, you can use my code RD5 for $5 off the PDF book. Happy practicing, and I'll see you guys in the next video.